Christian education in art Reformation. Abstract. The Reformed churches in Korea stand in the traditions of Luther, Zwingli, and Calvin's Reformation. But today's reformers have changed a lot from the ideas of the first Reformation. Reformed spirituality for the world is on the decline. On the other hand, I think capitalist and materializing. In this situation, it is necessary to review briefly the idea of religious education and art as claimed by Reformationism. I also want to understand how artists at the time changed and adapted their art world. Therefore, I would like to set the direction of how the modern Reformed Church can be subject to offset art and develop Christian art. Keyword: Reformation, Luther, Zwingli, Calvin, Christian education, Christian art, Dürer, Rembrandt, Schleiermacher. Introduction. The 2017 was the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther's birth. The Korean church is rising the voice of church renewal. It says that the term of Reformation we are talking about should be replaced with church reform. The Korean church is to commemorate the birth of Luther and look at the spirit of modern culture formed in Europe and prepares for a century of change in the Korean church. Luther's ideas were noted again for his reflection on education and art through his Reformation. In modern education, many pedagogical methodologies are emerging. Nevertheless, the essential question of education remains. In particular, media makes it easy to convey knowledge. However, the method of formality cannot solve the matter of content all. As we hoist the sovereignty of education and learning, I think we should look at Luther's theological human theory about the question of what is a human being. The Korean Protestant Church was formed by the beliefs of the reformers who dreamed of a new era. The direction and the content of the layman's education, however, was passed on to seminary and the level of faith education in the church fall to ordinary Bible education. Christian art now is an important part of the Reformation of the Catholic religious art, which the reformers were eager for. The distortion of Christian art has been around for 500 years. In the course of this history, the perception of Christian art is still poor, distorted, and ignorant in modern churches. So, now Christian art can be seen as a step back in the world. Therefore, this study aims to briefly review the idea of education and the art of the early Reformations. Next, it is to have a proper understanding of Christian art. Also, we have to think about how can we have the new acceptance and the direction of Christian art in modern Protestantism. Bonaventura summarized the functions of painting in three ways: education, devotion, and memory. First, painting makes the invisible of the Bible visible. At the time of the Reformation, the masses were uneducated and unneeded. The painting was an important means to them to know God. The image of a painting could be delivered the sermon educationally. Painting was a good way for illiterates to know the Bible. But today's situation is the opposite. Those who have learned can read the Bible, but pictures and stained glass are not easy to read. Second, the image can arouse the laziness of human senses. Images and pictures can give us faith and devotion through our physical sense. Third, our memories last longer than we hear, instead of the temporary nature of memory. Images last long, but we remember that history perceives time rather than perceiving things. Image is an important element to help memory. It is strongly appeared in the Wycliffe tradition that the criticism and the opposition to medieval art. He saw works of art boasting and expressing the richness of church. Thomas Aquinas sums up the medieval position in word: missiles of the image cannot remove the justification for the use of the image. Second, Reformation and the change of Christian art. The great changes have occurred in religious art since the Renaissance. The core of Renaissance art was to discover nature and human beings and to liberate them from religious domination. In particular, the Flemish artists achieved both natural and supernatural on one painting. They made it seem that nature itself had no meaning. The humans of Renaissance thought that they could not live in nature. They merely thought that the supernatural was present in nature and transformed the natural. The world in the Renaissance was a world to gain the new power and the dynamism from God. They were the three greatest masters of the Renaissance: Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Buonarroti, and Raphael Saggio were active in the southern part of the Alps. In the north, Lucas Cranach, Albert Dürer, and Matthias Grunewald worked. Not all artists at this time reflected the Christian concept. They thought they could form Christian concepts. 3. Luther's understanding of Christian art. The cognition and acceptance of the art of the Reformed Church differed from the Greek Orthodox or Catholic churches. The Reformed Church was very passive or critical about activity of the work of art and work of art. Its main feature was icon destruction. Luther's spirit of Reformation was fundamentally the result of crying out the reforms, insisting on the principle of only faith, only Bible, only grace, only glory. After a long struggle, Protestantism was born. They tried to restore the gospel-centered biblical Christianity through worship. The position of church art differed according to the Reformed Church, Lutheran Church, Reformed Church, and the British Church. Idolatry. Such as he saw that it was legitimate to criticize the misuse and the abuse of painting. But he thought it was unfair to remove or destroy it. Luther said, man cannot be divided into spirit and body because man is a whole. Therefore, art, music, and sacrament are appropriate representations of religion. Next is the first of a sermon from Luther's Wittenberg. God commanded us not to worship, to have the sun, the moon, and the stars with raising our eyes through Deuteronomy 4. For they were created to serve the nations, but there are many who worship the sun and the stars. Therefore, do we propose to ascend to heaven and remove the sun and the stars from the sky? No. It is better to leave them as they are. Wine and woman bring tragedies to many people and make them full. This does not mean we kill all women and throw out wine. And because gold and silver produce many evils, we blame them. Indeed, if we want to drive out our lost enemies, we must kill ourselves. The ones who have harmed us the most. For we do not have enemies greater than our own hearts. In Luther's sermons, we can see that the church was not removing art. We can see that he is asking us fundamental questions about life and faith. There is a possibility of the being idolized in everything we touch and see. Therefore, what is important is the fundamental attitude of faith. Luther did not seek to remove what could be a religiously difficult problem. It was a biblical correct transformation. Luther liked music very much. For Luther, music was not a human gift. This was a gift from God to earth. The gift of the music is God's creation. Music is what pleases the soul. Not only does it drive out demons, but it also raises unblemished joy. Luther saw the subject of worship not as proclamations or sacrament, but as a hymn of a community. 4. Calvin's understanding of Christian art. But Calvin's perception of the art was different from Luther. For Calvin, music was not the purpose of the promoting human pleasure. He insisted that it should be used only to praise God. The important thing in music was not melody, but lyrics. Therefore, we argued the chords should be denied and the single voice. Calvin did not allow polyphonic music in worship, but only in the home. Calvin allows only congregational music. The art music was banned. Calvinists also denied not only polyphonic music, but also dance, beautiful decorations, and colorful clothing. The art music and the musicians were deported out of church. This resulted in the development of the secular music. The organ was demolished from the church. Organists focused on secular music. As a result, organ instrument music became popular as concert music outside the church. For example, organ music's Pullman drum could only be played outside the church. Calvin's attitude was more decisive in painting than music. Calvin does not seem to prohibit the use of image in principle. For example, in Calvin's push on Christianity, I am not obsessed with the superstitious idea that I can never accept any image. It is a God-given talent to carve and draw and statue. I want to use it. Calvin recognized the function of art, but he argued that art did not help for faith. We think it is illegal to express God in any visible form. This is because God forbids such things, and because such things cannot be done to some extent without compromising the glory of God. It would not be more legitimate to worship the image as God, or to worship God in the image, unless it was justified to express God tangibly. Therefore, we concluded that nothing but visible objects should be expressed or manipulated in painting. Calvin mentions two things expressed visibly. The first is about historical events. The second points out that there may be figures or forms that have nothing to do with the historical events. The former shows some benefit in education and lessons. The latter criticized that it gives only nothing but pleasures. In conclusion, he affirms, even if the use of forms implies no evil, there is no value for education. The Reformed Church traditions have a clear and consistent negative attitude toward images. It was the result of the rejection of the sacraments of the Roman Catholic Church. It was not just a matter of misuse and use of images. They criticized and rejected sacramental reality. Although the priests of the medieval church meditated and saged the liturgy and the preachings, the number pointed out that the raiment was withheld from the limb of church. However, as a visible object, the image is that lay people can easily grasp. But even if we have owned the image, it is not we have received the Spirit. If we possess the Spirit, the possessed Spirit is the object. Spiritual believers had to exert some more effort to escape from material objects. This was especially true of radical Baptists and radical reformers such as Karlstadt. They say that images are worse than adultery. They say that breaking the commandments of the first commandment is worse than breaking the commandments of the second edition. 5. Progressive thinking of the Reformed Church on Christian art. For Puritans, United Kingdom, USA, Korea, and Gardner's aesthetics, dryness was more rapidly going. Music, decoration, and symbols were missing in the church. Dance and singing were minimized. As the Reformation progressed, the church and the art became more separated. Reformation ruled out the role of art in worship. Destroyed all the stained glass statues in the Reformed church building. As a result, almost no visible symbols were seen in worship. The altar has become a simple communication table. Bread and wine are not the Eucharist for the presence of Christ's body. This has become a rational memory of the Last Supper of Jesus Christ. Only the ear was the channel of the expressing God. Only word proclaimed in the Bible and in sermons become the main means of receiving the presence of God. The music was only an aid for word and worship. All other senses were questioned. For them, any act of seeing, touching, or tasting were insufficient to convey divinity. Thus, the Reformed Church promoted the term of language culture over visual culture. In other words, only words that can be read and interpreted through the preached word are the only medium of revelation. Nothing natural or material that is perceived by the five senses of man can be communicator of holiness. The Reformed Church has inherited this tradition of faith. As a result, worship was built. The opportunities for religious aesthetics have been lessened in the atmospheres of a church. The Reformed Church differs greatly in the acceptabilities of art and culture compared to Catholic or Orthodox churches. But today we live in a culture full of cleverly decorated symbols and languages. The Western Christianity is rational and solemn. This Reformed worship heritage permitted both worship and life. The simplicity and boredom were formed. 6. Understanding Korean Reformism and Christian art. Let's see at the Korean Protestant Church. The situation is even worse. The reason for this is, first, the Korean Protestant Church has been strongly influenced by the traditions and the Puritans of the Reformed Church. Thus, the strengthened ascetic tradition of faith was incorporated into the Korean Church. The Korean Protestant Church accepted a passive and critical attitude toward art. In the expression of faith, the focus was on listening reading, and writing. Only in accordance with Calvinism, music was recognized as an artistic means. All the paintings pointed to worldly things that every believer would hate and was dangerous, rather than placing emphasis on the sacraments. The Korean Protestant churches emphasizes only the preached word. Psyche, repentance, and revival. The Korean Reformed Church did not upset the fact that the Spirit is expressed through some matter with the belief that it is a spiritual religion. The Korean Reformed Church had no aesthetics connection with the world, so it went on to the afterlife and the post-history. Second, the will for art and aesthetic life presupposes a broad understanding of art. Very few missionaries had that understanding. Third, there is a disregard for indigenous culture from the point of view of religious sociology. The missionaries did not limit themselves to the gospel messenger. They recognized themselves as intermediaries of Western civilization. The Korean Reformed Church accepted this attitude without criticism. As a result, today only aesthetically succinct and doctrinal critiques remain in the church. The lack of artistry exudes aesthetic frivolity. 7. Rembrandt's words of Reformation. Rembrandt in the 17th century in the Netherlands was an exceptional figure in the Reformed Church. At the time, the Reformed Church expelled art from the church. The Reformed Church was no longer a patron of art, but religious themes were inherited by the painters individuals. The art of the Catholic Church sought to tell the stories of the doctrine and the Bible. Baroque art became more colorful and mysterious to reveal God's presence directly in the anti-Reformational atmosphere. Rembrandt's art, however, was dominated by the expressions of the individual's inner piety with the hope of salvation. Therefore, the dramatic effect expressed through the shape and outline of the figures on the canvas was less than the anti-Reformationism. It is depicted as a relatively inactive expression rather than active expressions of a character. He wanted to express the state of his inner soul. There is the presence of the God in that place. Also, the human figure was not an ideal human figure resembling an angel. It reveals the unique and everyday appearance of the individual, so it is drawn as a real human being. Rembrandt art represents a style based on religious reformation. The Reformed Church forbade Catholic themes in art. Art was not used sacramentally in worship, so art was created to raise the personal faith. In particular, Rembrandt's prepared etching was relatively inexpensive and convenient for individuals to own privately. Rembrandt's style and content express and convey the essence of Protestant faith. His art expressed the grace of God. He also portrayed human beings who were humble, and have no good deeds. Thus, in Rembrandt's paintings, only humans craving God's infinite mercy and grace return of those prodigal son were not the old art critics for the church's installation. His paintings presented the individual's religious and soul status. It was meditative art focused on the relationships with others. Rembrandt was a Protestant painter who clearly faced the finite self before the eternal God. 8. Rembrandt and the later artists. After Rembrandt, Protestant painters were free from biblical themes and subject matter. He had been oriented toward humans and the secular world. The Enlightenment despised the beauty of the culture but praised the beauty of nature. Schleimer, the father of the modern theology, worked with Handel and Jacobi to synthesize religion and art. Schleimer, all art, on the one hand, has a religious tendency, but on the other hand, it is a loss of free play as the individuals. And he claimed that is the highest impressionist revelation of God. Schleimer's theory of art is in line with the theory of religion. The best artistic output is religious, and the religious impression is artistic. The best art is religious art, and the religious experience always has the characteristic of artistic occurrence. Creation and art are intrinsically correlated. Just as a human being are creative in art, God is artistic in creation. He understood the religious feeling in the form of the beauty of art. It is a romantic influence. Art claims to describe religious feelings in the form of beauty, and that religion sees religious concept as a concept of truth. Since approximately 1950s in the West, art has sought to become independent from art to support and shape church and theology. It wanted to develop into the independent and autonomous field. Max Weber recognized the world of art in the process of rationalization in pursuit of autonomy and independence. Thus, he pointed out that art sought to save the world by directly competing with religion, transforming moral judgment into hobby judgment. Modern times has been generally proceeded with the tendency to separate art and religions from the autonomy of art and the secularization of religion. Thus, Christian theology did not know art well, and artists no longer painted Christian themes. Several contemporary painters, such as Alexander A. Jawlensky, Barnett Newman, drew on Bible topics, but now their pictures are not accepted by the church. It is just hanging in the general art museum or museums. Conclusion. After Enlightenment, the Reformed Church was mainstream of contentment, adhering to Orthodox doctrine, or emphasizing the morality of faith. Modern Reformed churches and theologies, however, most inherited and developed in churches of the trace and vein of the aesthetics of faith in church history. Augustine confessed the beauty of faith in his confession. I love you so late that you are so old, but you are so new in beauty. Look, you were inside me, but I was looking outside for you. The desire for faith in God led to a revival of Renaissance in Northern Europe. Gothic art took place against the backdrop of the expansion of the kingship of the papacy. Naturally, the educational dimension of the Catholic papagism, liturgy, and the worship of God were so directed. It debated greatly from the nature of the Bible and the Word. Thus, the Reformation came about by Luther, Calvin, and Zwingli. New writers and for the Pope and churches were subject of change, which was invisible, which was inevitable. So, music and art had been changed. As a result, only the most essential elements of faith remained. Unfortunately, church music was simplified and art was expelled from the church. Later, however, Rembrandt's message of Reformation emerged in print and painting. From the perspective of Christian education, pursuing the change of the times, the will and associationism to enlighten the world had purely expanded. Such desires led to completion of Reformation. Art is now free from the orders of the church. The art of freedom from the churches are new to the artist through creativity. Later, in modern theology, theologians such as Schleimer confirm that God's nature is creative. Beauty is seeking God, so Christian art set a new direction. Inspired by the artists in the world, numerous original works of art were created. The artist's new understanding of the Reformation is creating new art. Artists are now filling the beautiful world of God, united beyond the separate realms of the world and the church. Therefore, the world churches and the Korean churches must be active in the acceptance of Christian art and focus on its development.